Good
Chue.
morning, Jeanette.
Morning. Good morning, Sarah. Welcome everyone to Indigenous Voices. Super excited you could set up our welcome video for us. Have you ever been to the ROM? We have 3,841 guests tuning in live today. And we're just throwing out a poll out there, and we're hoping that for those that are signed up for the Zoom webinar today, you can play in the sandbox with us and answer the poll. So welcome to the grade 7 to grade 12 students to our opening season of Indigenous Voices. Super excited. We'll watch for the results of that poll. But for the moment, we'll introduce Sarah as our content producer, our digital content producer, and maybe just give us a little idea of how you're helping us out here today, Sarah.
Hey, everybody. So I will be controlling the broadcast from the control room and making sure you're seeing all of the views that you need to see. If you have any questions for our panelists, you can also put them into the Q&A. I can't guarantee that I can get every single one of your questions to them because there's a lot of people participating today, but I will make sure that your most frequently asked questions get to our panelists.
Excellent. And when we wrap up our episode today, what have you got going for us? What are we going to leave with today, Sarah?
So teachers, keep an eye on your inboxes. There will be an exit survey for you to complete and also a list of educational resources coming to you in about a day or so.
Fantastic. Well, it says 105% of the people, I'm not sure how that plays out in math, but 190 people that have tuned in have been to the ROM before. So welcome back. And for the 31 people who are joining us for the first time, welcome to the ROM. So we'll going to jump right in, and I'm going to change my screen a little bit quickly here. And I am going to share with you the ROM background, because the Royal Ontario Museum has been around for 106 years. In March, it'll be 107. And what I wanted to do is acknowledge that when we do the land acknowledgement at the Royal Ontario Museum, it's because it's a custom of Indigenous custom. So protocols guide cultures from the outside, and customary laws guide people from the inside. But if you look at this beautiful photograph behind me, I come from more than 4,000 kilometers away on Vancouver Island. This is one of my favorite parking spots back home in my small town of Port Alberni, to remind myself where I come from. This is where the ocean and the fresh water meet. And while the ROM is only 106 years old, we take time to acknowledge the ancestral homelands that the ROM, and where I'm broadcasting from, is home since time immemorial to the Anishinaabe, including the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, including Mississauga, the Credit, Haudenosaunee, and Wendat. So super thrilled and honored to be broadcasting from their homelands, and look forward to getting to know our team, our audience, with some of the polls that we have coming out for you in this in this episode of Indigenous Voices. This is our first episode of the season, and I just want to give a little shout out to our logo here that came from one of our youth support staff, Justin Kiaquato, and I'm very, very excited that we were able to make that happen for today. And what's beautiful about the eagle feather, I'm wearing eagle feathers on my necklace as well, is because eagle is a symbol that many Indigenous cultures from coast to coast to coast will acknowledge as being relevant to seeing a much bigger picture. So Indigenous Voices for me is about a chance for you to see a bigger picture of who we are as Indigenous peoples. And one of the things that I wanted to share with you is that at the tip of the eagle feather, you'll see that there are the 4 colors of humanity, not 4 races. We are all humans. We're just going to really stick to that theme as part of our way we talk about each other here on Indigenous Voices. We don't talk about racialization, we talk about humanity. And these are the 4 colors of humanity: red, white, yellow, and black. And today we're going to be talking about intersectionality of Afro and Indigenous identity. Before we jump into that, I just playfully wanted to share another background with you, because we can learn from nature. And this beautiful image here makes me think that when you're least expecting it, nature can help you see the world in different ways. And I'm hoping that Indigenous insights, with the use of this little kaleidoscope here, I don't know if I'm getting it right here, but just that idea, that bug eye that by the time you finish watching Indigenous Insights, you'll hopefully see the world in a few different new ways. So I'm super excited that we are going to jump into another poll here. We had a beautiful song that was playing for us at the top of our session here, and we're going to do a really quick poll. That song came from Asani, which is an outstanding trio of musicians that gave us permission to share that song for our season. And I just want to know, were you dancing a little bit, moving a little bit? Maybe not, maybe a little, maybe yes. I'm just curious because we were hoping that the music would help you feel welcome and acknowledge that Indigenous Voices is about celebrating contributions of living Indigenous cultures, because we might have a museum culture that shows that our objects are behind glass, but Indigenous cultures are very much living, and we're super distinct from many different nations. So it looks like 44% of you did dance or move around a little bit. Definitely moved around. 56 definitely moved a little bit, and no, for 19% of you just didn't move at all. So that's okay. Not everybody's a dancer. I just wanted to create a little opportunity for us to enjoy our background a little bit. So one of the things that I want to do is share with you an overview. I've done enough work over the years to know that everybody has different learning styles, and sometimes we need to pay attention to, people need to know where we're going. What are we going to do in this episode of Indigenous Voices? Well, we've been welcoming you to tuning in live, and those that are on Zoom can participate in the polls. Unfortunately, those in the YouTube waiting room area, the YouTube extra space, we're not going to be able to get you to participate in the polls, but you can at least be with us here today. We also had an introduction to Sarah in the control booth. We're going to introduce the household art materials you're going to need for today's activation. And I happen to have deafness, and my family knows sign language. And we've learned that there's a lot of deaf kids out there, less deaf learners, that are not getting much in sign language. So we're going to have fun with the sign of the day. So we'll talk about that, some historical facts. We're always going to make a connection to ancestral objects because that's who we are at the ROM as the school programs. We make very distinct connections to relevant ancestral objects, not artifacts, because these objects are living legacies of our survival and our ancestors. We're also going to have a guest today. Kaya Joan is going to do an art activation with us. We'll introduce their works with us later as we explore together the intersections of Afro and Indigenous identity. And then we're going to email resources to the teachers that are registered for the Zoom webinar, and we end with a closing. So I'm super excited that the teachers will be able to do a poll at the end, because we're always interested in learning how can we improve on our programming. So Indigenous Voices, for those that may have tuned in before, is here because we're at the ROM school programs, we have Indigenous education and digital learning as our priorities. And so today, we know that it's Black History Month in February. We also know that Indigenous History Month is often in June in Canada, and there's other times of the year where different cultures get celebrated. But because the ROM school programs has Indigenous education and digital learning as our strategic priorities, we're always trying to find wonderful ways to activate who we are as Indigenous peoples here at the ROM school programs. So we celebrate Indigenous culture and contribution year round. And the same is true where we can for other cultures, distinct cultures like Black communities. And today we're doing a brave topic. There's a lot that we can learn from history and how human beings have been treated on the planet. And there's a lot of work to be done. I'm trying to navigate. I'm hoping that my team can agree. I'm sharing my screen. There we go. What we're doing is looking at grade 7 to 12. You've had some experience and some exposure to history. So history is not always pleasant. And I'll reinforce that we're not talking about racial identities. We're talking about human identities. And when we bring Indigenous and Black community history together, there's some echoes that we can see from that. The way we organize our social relationships is determined by our worldview. And I, as an Indigenous person, one of at least 65 distinct nations in Canada, because we're not one good-looking group of people. but we do share a holistic system of values in common, that we are responsible and caretakers of this beautiful life-giving planet that we're a part of. And I'm hoping that you also recognize the hierarchy system, which is the Western system, where it's not just anybody at the top of the pyramid, but it's man, and man has domination over. So this slide on the side that really looks at colonization as a way of controlling populations has had a real big damage on our relationships, because what we recognize is that a doctor, Rupa Marya, pointed out that when colonization takes over lands, occupies lands, and enslaves populations and dehumanizes them, over time, that trauma builds up generation after generation, and there's illness that comes from that. So this is a very relevant socioeconomic way of looking at the impacts of colonization. So I know some of these concepts might be big and coming at you, but I'm hoping the teachers will take advantage of some of the relevant resources that we have prepared for you. So let's see what tipped the scale in history for this bad attitude towards Indigenous people. So 1492, Columbus sails the ocean blue is a very, very common rhyme, but actually May 4th, 1493 is a much important date. Nearly a year later, after Columbus arrived in 1492, what tips the scale in history is a conversation with the Pope. That's when the state and the church start getting familiar with each other and working together to exploit resources. And so the Pope says, if you find new lands that have no Christians, you can claim it in the name of God. So this is where history books tip the scale, and for hundreds and hundreds and centuries to follow, this bad attitude towards Indigenous populations, land-based populations, including Black populations, are dehumanized en masse, and it keeps getting rewritten in history that we can take your land if you're not Christian. Well, fast forward 392 years to 1884. I don't do math on the fly, so I did that math before we showed up here today. But 392 years later, almost 4 centuries later, a conference happens in Berlin because imperial rule is dominating. And I'm just sort of going to stop sharing my screen here for a second, because this map kind of blows my mind, because what stands out with this map, if we just take a really quick look at it, is that in 1492, or if you look at this map, in 1884, a big conference went down in Berlin, knowing that a lot of these lands are occupied and there's a lot of enslavement that's already happened and people being shipped off to the new world, as it were. But it almost looks as though the poor continent of Africa has become a puzzle piece for the rest of the world powers to do what they want with and to claim who has power over those nations. So one of the things that blew my mind was when I was traveling all the way from BC at the young age of 17 to all the way over to not Manitoba, but to Montreal, I met a Black person who spoke French, and I didn't understand that because I come from a small town where there's hardly any Black people. And I didn't understand the French part until I started learning my history. And that's because this conference in 1884 set the stage for the world to control and occupy lands based on imperial rule. So it's a complex history, right? And we only have a little bit of time together to explore these concepts together. But what I really want to do is just take us back to the main screen here. And I want to share my last little bit of my PowerPoint, just to show that the mirrors of these history and why we're talking about the intersection of Indigenous and Afro identity is because occupied lands and enslaved labor are a big part of colonization. And when imperial rule does when imperial rule takes over other parts of the planet, it overlooks existing cultures and it dehumanizes generations of people for the purposes of exploiting the land and their personhood. So in Canada, what makes this really significant is that in Canada in 1884, while this little puzzle piece game was going on over in Berlin, in Canada, we had our own potlatch ban, where our art, our stories, our ceremonies, even what we wear, that was changed in 1914. We weren't allowed to wear our customary regalia and such things. So the Indian Act also really infringed on our sense of identity and place within Canadian culture, because there was this idea that we needed to conform. So the reason I bring this up is not to upset people or point fingers, but to share facts that we can learn from history, that Western systems, mainstream dominant thought, is based on biases that are rooted in race, class, and gender. And these social constructs of power and control, who has power, who has control. And that includes who has access to education, to jobs. Look at this little ladder beside us. Like some cultures, mainstream Western dominant cultures, generations of family have no problem going to university, while other communities we might have, I'm like among the first generation in my family to have graduated. So I think there's a lot that we can learn from history, and that's our short little bit of time to introduce history to our viewers here on Indigenous Voices, because what we want to do with every episode is allow you to see the world in a different way. And we're broadcasting online because we want everybody to stay home and stay safe while we're all still on lockdown. So it's easy for us to broadcast online. And I'm going to try to switch over here to my little camera. I'm always learning here. Oops, I'll keep that muted. But each Indigenous Insights episode, we're also trying to make a connection to distinct cultures with our ancestral objects. And here's a lovely example, of some moccasins that come from Haudenosaunee culture, because our guest today is Haudenosaunee. And so I just want to switch gears a little bit over to our ancestral objects that we're going to be activating. And I'll get ready to show you a little bit about the art supplies if you haven't already got them. All we really need is a very simple pencil, maybe something to color with. We've got some pencil crayons here. I got at the ROM so that I can color on the go. And then I think the other is, it's really important if you want to, if we could say, we're pin this one here, all you're going to need is a piece of blank paper. For those people who know a little bit about mind map, we're going to have a chance to hear from our guest, Kaya Joan, a mind map of what we're proud of and what we want to grow in our sense of identity. And so there's an example of some of me planning ahead and getting ready to contribute to the conversation. And if all you have is paper, I recommend 2 pieces of paper so that you'll cut them out in the shape of a mask. And Kaya Joan will go over this. And then we're going to do a humble art activation. And Kaya asked me to have some examples ready of our mask, what I'm proud of. Here's what I'm proud of. And on this other side here, this is some areas I want to grow in my life. And then if you're fancy, if you have enough, have extra paper kicking about, you can have construction paper or you can have cardstock. And what's really beautiful is that you can also use different mediums. I'm an artist, so I did mine in collage as well, just to have some fun with that. And here's a collage from more than 20 years ago that I wanted to share as an example, because collage can really help you define who you are and who you're becoming. And what stands out is I'm going to maybe turn this one off, and maybe I'm just going to do a real quick question check. Check with you if there's any questions. We'll check in with our tech support. I'm trying to pin myself here. Replace pin. Check in with our tech support to see if there's any questions that might have brewed so far, because a lot of information is coming at people.
There is a lot of information coming at people. It looks like we are okay on questions for now.
Okay, well, keep that in mind if something surfaced from that little bit of history. Don't be shy to jump in and share your questions. And I think the other way that I want to just switch gears super quick is to explore a little bit of storytelling, because even at grade 7 to 12, stories are a beautiful thing. So here is our girl with no face. And here is a prop that goes with that, which is a mirror, because this is my humble rendition of Girl with No Face story. And it's a Haudenosaunee story. And it comes from our EduKit that we have that has a recording of this story. And I've heard a few versions of this in my little bit of lifetime. And so what stands out is Girl with No Face is made out of corn husk. Corn husk is what we peel off the corn, and it dries out, and artists make beautiful, beautiful art out of it. So bigger picture is Girl with No Face is a Haudenosaunee daughter, and she's a daughter of a leader. Not everybody says chief for their leaders. And this daughter was so beautiful. She knew as much, because whenever she would go out to do chores and pack water, she got distracted and looked at her good looking face in the mirror, in the water, the reflected water, because long time ago, there wouldn't have been mirrors. And she was so taken with her own beauty that Girl with No Face never got any chores done. She was busy looking at her good looking self. And instead of getting chores done, she just kept looking at herself in the water and in her reflection. And in time, the creator could see that she wasn't busying herself and keeping her responsibility, even as the chief's daughter, to be responsible for chores. That the creator took her face away as a reminder, no matter how good looking you are, or how ranking you are, or how important your family is, the community functions better when everybody takes responsibility for their community. So that's my humble setup for our story today. And I want to know if anyone's ever heard a version of this story, because that's only a version. And what's beautiful about oral stories is it depends on who's telling the story. You're going to get very different versions. So those that are tuned in with us by Zoom, I hope you can play in our poll box there and answer the question. Have you heard a version of this story before? So what stands out is, I'm just going to, oh, look at that. Most people haven't heard this story before, and maybe 21% have. So there are some people who are linked to oral traditions. Very glad to hear. So I'm going to go back to my screen here and take a moment to summarize what we learned a little bit today, that we have a relationship to Turtle Island as Indigenous peoples that use holistic systems that take responsibility for each other, for ourselves, for each other. And we have a gift economy where our wealth is defined by how much we give away, and reciprocity, exchanging of goods that we need with each other. While Western culture has hierarchy systems that are based on resource extraction and capitalism that really just wants money. And it involves exploitation of people and resources. So let's fast forward to how this is all linked to today. And today we're about to meet our guest, and we're going to talk about identity. And what happens is, in Western culture, identity tends to get whitewashed, a little bit like this white iceberg here. And sometimes all of our language and our food and everything becomes focused on the Western dominant culture. But underneath the iceberg, in like most cases, it's much deeper and much more layers of who we are as humans on the planet and the way our identities define that. So we're going to have fun today meeting Kaya Joan, who is our guest today. Kaya Joan is the current Indigenous Digital Learning Support Staff and is a multidisciplinary Afro-Caribbean, Jamaican, I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, Venetian, and Indigenous from Kahnawake, artist that's born and raised in Takaranto, Dish with One Spoon Treaty Territory. I'm just trying to read around my word. Kaya's work focuses on healing and transcending linear notions of time and colonial aesthetics. I wore my spiral necklace on purpose because Indigenous people think in spirals rather than linear. The other part of Kaya's bio includes Afro-Indigenous futurity and pedagogy are also centered in Kaya's work, exploring buried truths to uplift creation as a mode of healing, 7 generations in community arts for 5 years as a facilitator and artist. They are a core member of the Weave and Mend, an Indigenous Femme non-binary collective. So let's welcome Kaya Joan. Welcome.
Thank you. Nyawangoa, Jeanette. So yeah, Sego, everyone. Kaya Youngyuts. Kaya is what I'm called. Wakskare Wage, I sit with Bear Clan. Ganyangeha Newagotan Sodun. I am Ganyange Haga with relations from Kahnawake on my mom's side, as well as Irish, Scottish, Jamaican. And then on my dad's side, we're Vincentian from Bequia. So I'm just going to share my screen with you really quickly. And I just want to say thank you, everyone, for tuning in today and listening to what we're sharing with you. Really excited to be able to share a little bit about myself and my art practice, and talk about how I use art as a tool to celebrate intersections of my identity as a person, as an Afro-Indigenous person. So this is just a reminder of what sort of materials you'll be needing today. So I'm going to start by talking about how I'm born and raised in Tkaronto. So Tkaronto, or Toronto, is a Mohawk word, a Ganyangeha word, and it means where the trees stand tall in the water. And that refers to the ancient topography, or how the lakefront used to look when the city was mostly woodlands and wetlands, way, way, way back in the day. And Tkaronto is on Dish with One Spoon Treaty territory. And this image here is a wampum. And this wampum is a physical representation of that treaty. It's a treaty between the Haudenosaunee and the Anishinaabe peoples. It's an international treaty because it's between two distinct nations. And yeah, the wampum is like a physical documentation of treaty in general that Indigenous nations in the Eastern Woodlands use. And Jeanette is showing us right now some materials that are a part of the wampum. So wampum is made from shell. It's made from migus or cowrie shell, as well as quahog shell. So the quahog is the purple shell.
If you stop sharing your screen, they'll be able to see it super quick.
Okay, sure. If you want to share again, yeah. And so I'm just gonna continue sharing now. I might actually just keep sharing because it's kind of hard to toggle on and off.
That's right.
So hopefully it's sharing again. There we go. So yeah, I'll just speak a little bit about what this treaty entails, because it's really important. It's been an important part of my journey to understand the history of this territory that I was raised on. So this black part in the middle represents the dish part of the treaty. And the dish is also representative of the land. And then in the middle, this white part right here represents a little piece of beaver tail, which is a delicacy among Indigenous folks. So this means that the land is not an exponential resource. This little piece of beaver tail is meant to be shared amongst all nations who are accessing this territory and stewarding this territory, taking care of it. And this treaty talks about how you have to take enough for yourself and your community, but you also have to leave enough for those who come after you. And it's called Dish with One Spoon, No Knife, because it's speaking to ending any sort of warring or disagreement between nations over this territory. And I just want to shout out my teachers, Ange Loft and Al Corbier, who have shared a lot of knowledge on these histories. And so this piece on the, what would this be, the right-hand side, has some of these symbols in them. And I want to start off by sharing this piece and talk about how there's some intersections happening here. So I have an image of the cowrie shell, which is a material in the wampum, but it's also a material that my Afro-Caribbean ancestors use and people in the Caribbean use. And so I like to use this symbol because it speaks to those intersections of my identity, right? So this piece is also talking about my understanding of Tkaronto, the protocols of the treaty, and how I understand myself in relationship to those living histories. And I say living histories because these stories are not in the past. They are very much present and inform how we move into the future. And a lot of my artwork is about placemaking. You know, it's about my identity, but it's also about placemaking. And that means understanding how place informs my being. Exploring my relationship to place helps me build a stronger relationship to my identity. And I'll just share this work that I've done as well. This is a mural. My relationship to land and to Toronto is so closely related to my relationship to myself because I can learn so much from what surrounds me. Exploring the land that has shaped me and all the lessons that I've learned from growing up in the city is a really important part of my identity and who I am. So when I'm making art about this, it helps me to understand my responsibilities to this place, as I'm partly a guest on these territories, as well as my responsibilities to my community and to myself. So I use all sorts of visuals to explore this, such as the wampum, the cowrie shell. You may have seen some like tagging and graffiti, but there are so many more stories that inform my identity. And as an artist, my job is to weave together these stories, creating artworks that celebrate all aspects of my identity and my being. So maybe we can launch the second poll, or the poll about what sort of art do you do? I'm really interested to see what sort of art forms you explore. And of course, there are so many more art forms than just the few humble art forms that I've listed here. So maybe I haven't listed one that you're interested in, but you know, art is such a beautiful way to convey story. And there are so many different ways of doing this. And story is so important. It's an essential part of our identity. And, you know, we're made up of so many different stories. And I like to think that the first stories that we are comprised of are those of our ancestors, you know, the ones who came before us, as without them, we wouldn't be here today. Oh, that's awesome. A lot of people drawing. That's nice to see. Some instruments, dancing. That's wonderful. We will be drawing today, so yous are in luck. So yeah, ancestral stories, really important. Even if we don't know those stories, we carry them in our being. They are gifts from our ancestors. And so a large part of how I understand my identity is through imagining what my ancestors' stories were, and what stories am I going to pass on to my future kin, as I will be an ancestor one day. So this next piece I'm sharing is called Grandmothers, and it represents my connection to my ancestors, to all of my ancestors, as I feel I have a responsibility to continue their legacy of greatness and of joy, and to tell stories that they may have not been able to express because of colonization and the way colonization suppresses story. There's been so much disconnection that Indigenous and Black folks have faced, and that we continue to face and experience because of the effects of colonization. A disconnection from culture and land and language and history. Some disconnection that I've experienced personally that I'll share with you is on my mom's side, my great-great-great-grandparents moved off of our home territory of Kahnawake. And my great-great-grandmother, my great-grandfather, my grandmother, my mom, and myself were all raised away from our territory, our community, without our language and our culture. And we're just making those reconnections now, which is really powerful. And I've also been disconnected from my Caribbean ancestry in a way. My father's parents moved here from Bequia, and then my mom's dad moved here from Jamaica. So, you know, I'm disconnected from those territories as well. And, you know, our Caribbean ancestors were taken from their traditional territories through the transatlantic slave trade. So a lot of my work is about how do I reconnect with this history? How do I reconnect with these stories and truths and create new stories, right? And that is through art. I really think art is such a powerful tool for rewriting those stories. So one story, yeah.
Can we jump into, we've got probably just over 10 minutes left. Can we jump to how young people, how our audience could really start to shape their story? Do you want to share our Jamboard idea?
Okay, so just the activity then?
I'm just wondering if you want, I'd like to hear what you have to say about rivers, because I know that's coming up. I just wanted to switch gears once you finish sharing a little bit about your rivers. What do you think?
Okay, well, yeah, sure. I'm getting there. Yeah, I'll take 5 more minutes then to wrap this up then, and then get into the activity.
Perfect.
So yeah, yeah. So I'm gonna share a little bit very quickly about a story that's been very important to me, which is the Haudenosaunee creation story of Sky Woman. And right now I'm sharing an image of a sculpture at the ROM called At Peace, that's by Jacob Thomas Jr. And creation stories are one really interesting part of our identities. And we might know our creation stories and we might not know, but the Haudenosaunee creation story has been very important in my identity and making reconnections with that part of my ancestry. So I'm going to jump ahead to share a little bit about rivers. Rivers are another metaphor, another symbol that I use to explore my identity. So I'm showing you right now a map of all of the rivers and tributaries in Toronto. And a lot of these rivers have been buried as the city has been built over time. And I just want to shout out Jill Carter for teaching me about this. There's even a river that has been buried that's next to the ROM, and it's called Tattle Creek. So next time you're at the ROM, Philosophers Walk, you find a drain pipe, take a listen, and you'll hear the river still flowing. And I really love that metaphor, that we can see these rivers being buried as a metaphor, because although they're still buried, or although they're buried, they're still running and often flooding parts of the city. So it reminds me that despite any sort of disconnection or burial of stories within ourselves through, various modes of colonization or whatever it may be, they're still flowing, they're still there, and we can still access them, right? So I think now I'll just jump ahead. This is just a piece that actually I have created that is intersecting two different stories. So the story of these rivers, but also the story of Anansi, which connects me to my Caribbean ancestry. And I'm not sure I have enough time to share that with you today, but maybe you want to look that up. Look up Anansi, the trickster. So just wrapping up, I want to talk a little bit briefly about how it can be really difficult to express your identity for so many different reasons. The world tries to pigeonhole us or force us to be one thing, and that's really frustrating. We can experience erasure, which is a denial of our truth and our being. And that's something I've experienced a lot as an Afro-Indigenous person. Growing up, you might not see yourself reflected in popular media, or you might not hear other stories about folks who look like you or have the same stories as you. And that can be really hurtful and cause a lot of wounds. And those wounds need to be healed somehow. And art is a really wonderful way to do some of that healing and make those connections and celebrate our identity. So the activity today is mask making. So what we're going to do, we're not going to be able to finish this activity because we only have a few moments left together. But Jeanette and I are going to really quickly talk about how you're going to go about making these masks. So you're going to be thinking about some questions. What identities do you hold? What stories make up who you are? Your hopes, your fears, your accomplishments. How do you express those identities? And what symbols can you use to represent those identities? So we're going to start off by brainstorming. And then after we brainstorm, Jeanette and I are going to show you one way you can brainstorm. You're going to hop into making your masks and think about on one side of the mask, what you're proud of. What parts of your identity are you proud of? And then on the other side of the mask, what parts of your identity do you want to build a connection to, to strengthen? So I'm just going to share this little brainstorm that Jeanette and I did together right here. Okay, so for my brainstorm, I was thinking about how much I love food. I was thinking about how I'm an artist. And I'm also thinking about this little illustration here of a bear, because I'm Bear Clan, as well as my astrological sign. I'm a Cancer. I'm really connected to the moon. So those are some things that I was exploring. Jeanette, would you like to talk about what you were exploring? Oh, we can't hear you.
I've got to unmute, but you could see I was adding some pictures I had ready in the wings there. I've got a new canoe that I want to learn. I've had a lot of fun learning how to use my new razor. I'm all about dance. If anybody who knows me, I go by she, her. I'm a two-spirit mom. I'm a cancer survivor, lots of things. I wondered if you could share the next page super quick. I shared something I used on page number 2 there. I shared something that I used with photocollage.com, which is another playful way you could do this work. Sometimes we do it by drawing. Some people are more comfortable, but you can cut and paste. But if you go back to your first page, that's what we wanted to set people up, that Jamboard is found on Google Docs, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it becomes a way that while we're stuck online, if you can't think of what to think about your own identity, sometimes it's good to have a conversation with your best friend, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, if we were in a classroom together, this would be really interactive. Like we would be doing this all together, walking around, talking with each other, because those conversations of encouragement and supporting each other are really important for uplifting each other's beings and identities. right?
Can you show some samples of what we've made before we wrap up here?
Yeah, I would love to. So I'll start by showing mine. I just used paper, one piece of paper and some markers. And so I just did a face shape, and I put some rivers on my face to represent my connection to Toronto. I put some fish to represent my Caribbean ancestry because we love fish. And I also put a bear to represent being Bear Clan and sitting with Bear Clan. So this is the stuff that I'm really proud of. And that's just a few humble drawings of what I'm proud of. And on the other side, what I want to build connection to, I drew a flower to represent speaking my truth. I want to speak my truth more. I also want to learn my language and continue to learn my ancestral language of Ganyangeha or Mohawk. I drew a moon to represent just wanting to be more in tune with my own cycles of healing. I drew this mound of trees to represent wanting to be in nature more, and reconnect with nature and teachings that exist in my environment, and some hands for my ancestors, always looking to connect further with my ancestors. So that's my example. Jeanette, would you like to share yours?
Cool. And I mean, that's a paper example, and you saw me share some examples earlier. Here's an example of me using like actual plaster, like that for people who are artists, and when teachers go back to school, they can, maybe if they have a budget, but that's just another way of exploring your public self and your private self. I mean, if you have, you can add like, you know, add your own supplies, maybe braid some hair with pipe cleaners. It's meant to be for you to explore your identity today. And I think more importantly, what stands out too is thanking Kaya for being a part of our season opening of Indigenous Voices, because we're not all one good looking group of people, and our identities do mix over time. There's very few cultures I would like to imagine that are it's rare for communities to have just the same ancestry. You know, some cultures still value that, and there's still even arranged marriages we can hope are amicable. But more importantly, what we have is an opportunity to celebrate that despite all that's happened, your Indigenous and Black identity have survived, with art at the center of that, is what I'm hearing you say.
Yes. So Nyong'o for having me.
I'm so excited that we got a chance to play in the sandbox together and get to meet more than 3,000 students. And we were both a little overwhelmed that these 3,000 students luckily are not right in front of us. We do want to say thank you to the people who have supported for today happening. Let's have another quick hello to our control room support. So hello to Sarah. I'm very, very pleased that what happens in Indigenous Voices is made possible tech-wise to go smooth with Sarah's awesome help. So thank you to Sarah for helping us today. And again, thank you to Kaya Joan for being so generous with your as a young person, sharing how you explore your identities through the arts, because we know in Canada and the Potlatch Band that our art was outlawed in Canada. And thank you to all the viewers out there who tuned in. Thanks to Asani for sharing your music with us. Thanks to all of our support in the ROM proper for all the great exposure and support we've gotten from across departments. I'm also keen to thank Mizwe Beek, Aboriginal Employment and Training, because they're also responsible for annual paid positions like Kaya holds for a job experience, major job experience. And also thank you to the Slate Family Foundation for their generous support and ongoing interest in supporting Indigenous education and digital learning. Is there anything else either of you want to say to us, or any reminders, Sarah?
So there are a lot of thank yous coming in on the Q&A that I can pass on to you. And just a reminder that the session is recorded. So around about Wednesday, it should be live on the ROM's YouTube channel with captioning.
Fabulous. Any last words there on your end, Miss Kaya? Anything you might like to add?
No, not particularly. Just, yeah, thank you, everyone. Oh, actually, please do share your art activations with us on Twitter. So you can find ROM on Twitter, and we would love to see what your masks look like. So tweet us.
At ROM Toronto, all one word. So that's our broadcast for today. I want to thank everybody for tuning in, and we look forward to sharing the more this season with you. Have the day you most need, everybody.